Okay, it is 1 o'clock. I'm going to get started. I don't know how many of you are joining us. Welcome to those. I do see some in the chat. So welcome. Glad to have you all with me. My name's JB. So I run the programs here for Culture and Heritage. Now, I'm not Ukrainian. I didn't grow up doing Pysanka. It's actually been about 6 years that I've been doing this now, though. So I have definitely gotten a lot better over the years with it. Normally, we run a lot of these workshops. So we run public workshops during this time of year, Easter time. We actually have education programs too. So normally we see over 300 students within a 2-week period. Can't say I'm too sad that it's a little bit quieter this year, despite the unfortunate reasons, but it's nice to have everybody at least do this virtually with me. So you should all know, of course, and hi, Joni, I see you there too. You should all know, of course, that this is the Pysanka workshop. What I'm thinking I'm going to do, everybody will work at a different pace. I think the way I'm going to do this workshop is it will probably go maybe around an hour, maybe a little longer. But when I run these workshops in person, people can take, 2 hours to 3 hours, depending on how long you want to spend on your design. So I'm going to go through everything. I think that I'm going to go through sort of a quick demo of what the steps will be. And then I'm going to walk you through step by step by step. So those of you that are working at a slightly different pace than me, you'll have the option of going ahead and going on with future steps if you're a little bit ahead of me. So as I say, if you have questions, there is a chat function there. I probably won't be staring at it all the time, but I'll try and watch that. I've got you at a high angle so that you can sort of see overall what I'm doing. When it comes to the slower version of this that I'm going to do, I'll probably move you down so that you can see very specifically what I'm doing on the egg. So what I have here is I have my aluminum foil. This is because it's fire safe. It's not going to matter if wax drips on it. I have my egg. I put my egg in a little bit of aluminum foil there just so it doesn't roll anywhere on me. I have my candle. I have a lighter. I have a pencil. This is optional. If you are working with kids, I definitely would recommend having the kids start with pencil because it gives them a chance to really think about their design. Once wax goes on your egg, it is on your egg. A lot of people think you can kind of scrape it off a little bit and redo your line. You cannot. Even if you can't see it, there is a film of wax on your egg. So once it's on there, it's on there. So mistakes that are made, I always say, work with the mistakes. Have it be an intentional mistake. I also, of course, have my black beeswax. Sorry for the noise, it's the railway track outside. This is a roll of black beeswax. Some of you might be using different types of beeswax at home, which is perfectly fine. The black is just going to show up on my egg a little bit better for you guys. And of course, I have a kitsuka. The kitsuka I have given anyone who has the supply kits that I gave out will have one of these. Anyone who has kitsukas at home might have something different like a metal kitsuka like this. Now, I personally really like these wooden ones. Obviously, their longevity is not as good, but I find they don't gunk up as much, so I quite like using them. And of course, I have my eggs. Now, I also included in supply kits some information about designs. Now, Pysanka is very interesting. Pysanka is the singular egg. Pysanki is more than one. That's why you'll hear those two words. And it's a very interesting tradition that actually goes back way beyond pre-Christian times. So I think I'll speak about that a little as I go about doing the actual project, so I don't talk and bore you guys. But this booklet had a lot of designs. So hopefully some of you had a chance to sort of see what you'd like to put on your designs. Or your eggs. There's many things you can do. There's plant motifs, there's animal motifs, geometric patterns are very, very popular. Or you can do something that's entirely contemporary, and a lot of artists do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of start off here. The first thing, as I said, I'm going to roll through this a little bit more quickly, so you don't need to necessarily keep up. I'm going to start you on these first steps, and then I'll kind of show you what will be the next steps before I go back and do it a little bit more slowly. So as I said, you're starting off with your egg. Now, I'm just using a basic store-bought egg, which I imagine a lot of you are as well. A lot of Ukrainian artists will use a variety of different eggs, and they'll also choose their eggs very, very specifically. They'll hold them up to the light. They'll look for flaws. I haven't done anything like that. I've, of course, made sure there's no cracks, and I'll be cautious with it. But this is just your basic chicken egg, which will work just fine for our purposes. But different eggs, you will notice, will take the dye in different ways. These Pysanka, I'll show you, my dye station is over here, by the way. These Pysanka dyes are very, very strong, much stronger than like a food color dye at home. So they will, the egg will take to it immediately. Whereas if you're using other dyes at home, it might take a little bit longer for the egg to sit in the dye for it to really pick up that color. These dyes will work pretty quick, but it'll also just depend on the shell. You might have little striations in the color, and that just comes down to the innate flaws inside the shell of your egg. So if you're working with kiddos or you just feel more comfortable, what I like to suggest first is to go in with a pencil and to sort of sketch out your design very roughly. People will often ask, okay, well, will I see the pencil marks at the end? You will, but the great thing about pencil is that literally just with a wet fingertip, you can easily smear it off. So the only lines that are actually going to show are the first lines that you put down in the egg. Pysanka is a wax resist method, and this will sound kind of complicated unless you're familiar with wax resist, but it'll make more sense when you see it. Essentially, whatever we cover up will remain the color we cover up with the wax. So if I am covering up white with wax, it'll remain white. By the time I dye it, whatever I cover up at that stage will then remain that color. So just for my first egg here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very basic traditional star pattern. And I'm just going in with my pencil here just to give me a guideline. Something I mentioned in those kits is that it's one thing to draw a straight line in pencil. It's very different to do it in wax. I have been doing this for a lot of years, so I don't find it too challenging. A lot of you might. So I often say, if you are a little shaky with your hand, if you think that might be a bit of a challenge, then go ahead and use that to your advantage. Do more wiggly lines, curved lines, zigzag lines, not trying to be as focused on those straight lines. As well, of course, something important to remember is if you're going in with pencil in these initial designs, keep it basic. Now, this generally isn't too much of a problem for adults. Kids tend to like to go in and draw very, very small or very, very into the details. We're going over all of this with wax. It's our guideline. We don't need to have every single detail down here. It really is just kind of giving me an idea of what I'm doing. I'm not going to do my whole design on this egg. This is sort of the faster version I'm going to show you, and I'll go back in with the second egg and do a more complex pattern. But you can sort of see, I'll bring it up to the camera so you can see what I'm working on. I'm just doing a very basic geometric star. I've just done it on one side. You have an entire egg to work with here, of course. I'm just going to do this as my initial pattern to show you kind of my process. So once you have done your entire design in pencil, you're going to be ready to use the wax. So first things first, I'm going to light my candle. Don't do this until you're ready to do so. My candle, I've got windows open, so my candle's probably going to be a little wobbly here. Now the kitsuka, one thing I really, really love about these rolls of wax is that they fit perfectly into the kitsuka end. So this would be true even if you have a different type of kitsuka, but I've already filled mine, but it goes right into the end, and then I just break off the little bit so that you never want this wax hanging out like that, right? Because the second it gets in the flame, you're gonna have wax dripping all over the place. So when I do it, I have it very nicely filled in the tip top, and I have wax inside. I'm going to have to constantly fill that. You'll see as you go. All of you have, at least those that picked up supply kits, you have new kitsukas, which means they're gonna start working quite quickly. If you have an older kitsuka, it might take a little bit in the flame to figure out how to get it dripping. The hotter the kitsuka is, the more the wax will come out. So something I do warn is if it gets too hot, it'll come out in globs. So you might end up with a big glob that you need to decide is going to be like a flower petal or something like that. It does happen. When you are doing this, never come from on top of the flame, always come from the side. That's true even if you're using a metal kitsuka, but definitely with the wooden kitsukas. So I come from the side, and what I'm doing is I'm just dipping the tip of the kitsuka into the flame from the side, and I'm gonna flip and I'm gonna do the back. Now I'm doing the back because this is fresh wax. So I want that to get wet as well, or hot as well. To see if it's working, I just like to tap it onto the aluminum foil below, and mine's already working. That's how quick it went. So the first wax I put on here are gonna be my white lines. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a few of these lines here. I don't think I'll do all of my lines because I don't actually want that much white personally, but a lot of people will do their initial guiding lines. I'm gonna get a little closer to the camera so you can see what this looks like initially. So you can see the black really shows up here. And I'm being a little messy with this one. This is just a practice aid to show you guys kind of your process. So I've done a few of those black lines there. Now, the other thing is your wax dries immediately. I can touch that pretty much immediately. My egg, I didn't mention this at the start, but my egg was room temperature. If your egg's a lot colder, to be honest, the wax we're using is pretty good. It's gonna stick no matter what, but depending on what type of wax you're using, sometimes it will crack off a little bit too much if your egg is very, very cold. So tend to use room temperature egg. So when I have my initial lines on there, those are my white lines, then I'm ready for the dye station. Now I have slightly different colors than those I gave you in your kits, but I have some of the same. I have, what do I have here? Yellow, orange, I have black as well, red, and I have green instead of blue. You guys have that royal blue. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the colors afterwards, but the most important thing you need to know about the colors is to start with the lightest color and work your way dark. You do not need to use every single color. That's really gonna be up to you. And the colors can be a bit of a science experiment. You may end up with purple, for example, if you're going from red to blue. In fact, I think you do end up with a bit of a purple if you go from red to blue. So there can be some nice surprises that way. I didn't give you guys any colors that really, really contrast. If you've added to your dyes, like you have additional dyes of food color, you'll have to see how the eggs take to that because the Pysanka dyes are so much stronger. So the first dye I have, normally I would go to a dye station, but to stay in the camera, I'm just gonna bring it to me. I have a spoon in my dye. This is just so I don't drop my egg into the dye and crack it. So I'm gonna gently put it down. I also have paper towel to my side. I included some of that just in case you didn't have that handy at home. That was in your kits as well. Now, as I say, Pysanka dyes are super, super strong, so it will take the dye pretty immediately. So I'm gonna take this out right away into my paper towel. And I'm going to dry it off. Most Pysanka artists will actually not dry it off. They will take their eggs and let the eggs dry for hours before continuing this process. This process can take, a full day for a lot of these traditional Ukrainian Pysanka artists. But you can see here that it's taken a pretty good yellow color right away. Put that back. So now I'm ready for my next layer of wax. And this layer of wax is going to be whatever I want to remain yellow. So if I had like a little sun on here, I'd want to make sure at this stage to go ahead and cover that with wax. Anything you want to remain yellow, cover it with wax. I'm just going in and replacing some of that wax, breaking it off so that I have some extra in there. Getting it hot again. I think I will show you an example of when it globs out. I'll do that with another color, just to show you kind of how you can use that, especially if you want to color in areas. I'm just going to quickly add some wax here in the middle. I just want you to be able to see what that color is going to look like in the end. I'm not being very artistic about it at this stage. A bit more wax, and that black really, really does show up on that egg, so that's pretty handy too. The darker the egg gets, the more challenging that'll be. But my messy little bit of wax here, and I've got at least enough on the egg there that I'm ready for my next dye. I'm not going to go through all of them at this point. I'm just going to show you a few examples, but I'll bring over the red, same process. Going from yellow to red, it's going to be a serious cherry red, like an orangey kind of bright red. I have a slightly different red. You guys have a deeper scarlet red. If I went from yellow to green to red, it would still take the red, but that red would end up almost like a more brown red. So like I say, it can be a little bit of an experiment with your colors. And one of the reasons I gave you blue and red is that it gives you the option of creating other colors. It gives you the option of creating that purple. So you can see this has given me a very, very vibrant red. Put this back. And finally, I'm just going to do, I think, one more layer of wax, and then I'll pop it into the black so that I can show you the final steps, and then we can sort of slowly do this together. So I'm going to come a little closer, and I'm going to try to put a glob of this on so you can see sort of what happens when the wax gets a little hot. Let's get it a little hotter. So you can see how fast it comes out when that's hot. So if you're covering large areas, getting that wax hotter can help you do so, but it's also a little bit of a risk because the hotter that wax is, the faster it's going to come out. And of course, you do run the risk of it coming out in a very big glob. And if you put really, let's maybe do a few dots here. If you put really thick layers of wax, that can just be a bit of a challenge when it comes time to take off the wax. And I'll tell you why kind of at the end here. So I think I've got enough that you'll be able to at least see some of that red at the end. Okay. So most Pysanka artists will end with black. That is a choice. There are eggs that will be kept one color. In fact, it's considered a symbol of good health. Like if you give an egg to someone that's one color, it's thought to be a wish for good health. So there's symbolism in different colors, of course, but why a lot of artists, even these days, contemporary artists will choose to end in black is because it really makes those other colors pop. Like it'll really make them stand out. So I haven't given it a lot of time in black. The longer I leave it in black, the deeper it'll probably become. Mine's gonna, you'll see a little bit of the red in the black in this one. Almost a little purpley actually. So get the dye off. Now you can even see some of the color kind of popping through at this stage, but the wax is still on. The wax has not gone anywhere. But you can see a little bit of the color through the wax there. So let's suppose that's all I wanted to do at this stage. Obviously this has been a rushed little demo to show you the sort of first steps here. At this stage, I need to get the wax off. You guys have a couple options. One of the nice things about you being at home is that you can actually do it a different way than I can in the classroom, which is in the oven. So some people will put their eggs into an oven inside an earthenware bowl, you know, an oven safe bowl. And you keep the temperature very low. The temperature is supposed to be between 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. So what is in Fahrenheit? 95 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So quite a low temperature in the oven. And you leave it in there until the wax drips off. So that's kind of the easiest way to do it. You can put it in the oven, let the wax drip off itself. This is kind of the fun way to do it, but it is challenging. When your egg has been in the wax, it is more slippery. It just is. Eggs are slippery anyways, but it's smooth and it's a little bit more slippery. So there is a danger in that. Like I say, I usually teach over 300 students each Easter. So we've had many cracked eggs as a result of this. And hilariously, it's actually usually the parents trying to help the kids that accidentally drop their eggs. So you can imagine how well that goes over. But I'm going to kind of show you this process. I like doing it because it's got a major wow factor to it. And you can see the results right away. You can take that wax off right away. So I have very carefully held my egg in one hand here. I have my paper towel in the other hand. Obviously, I'm not going to bring my paper towel up to the flame. It is flammable. Be cautious of that as well. But what I'm actually going to be doing is putting the wax part of the egg right into the flame. Now, a couple important things about this. Again, do not come from above the flame. The flame will, I can kind of show you on the undecorated side, the flame will try to lick up around the egg. You can, oh, it's moving all over, there you go. So it's hard to see in the black, but what it does is it scorches the egg. So it'll scorch your design. You don't want to do that. Always come from the side of the flame and stay as low as you can. You can kind of tell when that flame wants to scorch because it'll start licking around the egg and smoking a little bit. Just pull back. So it's a little more challenging when you have airflow in the space like I do right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, I'll kind of face it towards you guys. I'm going to put the egg right into the flame from the side. And I'm actually holding it in there like it's maybe I'll go to the side so you can see. I'm holding it right in the flame for a minute or two, you know, or a good few seconds until I can see that wax be shiny and drippy. I'm going to pull it back and immediately wipe off. So I'll show you how much is revealed already. So right away that wax just drips off, and this obviously can take a little while if you've put really big thick globs of wax onto your egg, because you got to keep it in the flame and possibly go over that area a couple times. I kept my layers pretty thin because that's all you need. You don't need a huge glob, but sometimes it happens. So here we go. All right, I'm going to get most of this off. Now, I work at this pretty quickly because I'm usually doing this with a very quick timeline of having 30 students all needing help. So I can do it pretty quickly, but obviously take your time when you're doing it. You want to get all that wax off if you choose to do it this way and not in the oven. Like I say, the oven is easier. You do have that option. So you can see kind of my messy design, but you know, it turned out okay. And you can see how vibrant those colors are. That's what I really love about the Pysanka dyes. It's a really, really vibrant color. So for now, I'm just going to put out my flame. And I'm going to show you the final step before I go back, and I'm going to bring you in close and you'll have a better angle of what I'm doing and whatnot. So you have a choice with your eggs. Some people will not drain them. They'll just leave them as they are. And that's for obvious reasons. It's nice if you can just leave the egg as it is. Over time, the egg is supposed to inside get hard. So it should form like a little hard ball inside. There is slight risk in doing that. The risk is that if you have an egg with flaws, you can potentially have gases build in the egg and it will explode. So you will have an exploded rotten egg. That's not so pleasant. It's pretty rare that happens though. Personally, why I like draining the egg is because something about the full egg, it's so breakable. Oddly enough, once you've drained it and it's just the shell, that shell actually hardens over time. And even if I dropped it, it might crack a little bit, but it's not gonna go splat like an egg would. So I kind of prefer that. You guys at home do not have this fancy little tool I have. This is a bit of an expensive Pysanka tool, actually. There's a variety of these. These are egg blowers, so you can kind of see what that is there. So you blow in this end, that end, pointy end, goes into the egg, or the bottom of the egg, and I'm gonna do that for you to show you kind of how it works. But your option at home, if you want to drain, all you need is a pin, any kind of needle, any kind of pin, and you put one hole at the top. You can keep it pretty small, one hole at the bottom, and you just leave it elevated somewhere to drain overnight. It'll probably take a while unless you enlarge the hole slightly, and that will drain your egg for you. So that's an option. I have a lot of people though that just choose not to drain their eggs. They find that that's, you know, the easiest for them, and that's perfectly fine in most cases anyways. So normally I do this over a sink. It's quite the process. It's a little grody. Kids love watching me do this. So a lot of people have pictures of me doing this actually over the years. I'm going to show you kind of what my process is. Many people get nervous about putting holes in the eggs, worrying that they're going to, you know, crack the whole egg doing this. I'm going to come closer to show you what I do, because you can do the same process with a needle. So when I'm at the bottom of the egg, what I actually do is I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to kind of scooch it back and forth on the edge. Sorry, it's hard to see what I'm doing here from your angle, I realize. But when I do that, I kind of slowly open it up. I'm going to create a bigger hole simply because that's easier for me when I'm showing you guys right now, but a big enough hole for me to drain it. So using an egg blower, I just need the hole at the bottom. Then what I do is I flip and blow. And that is all the egg yolk. A little messy. And what I do to keep this is I just pop it back into the carton and let little, you know, dregs and drips go back into the carton as well. So now I have my empty egg. Feels really good. It feels nice and light, and I can just set that aside. So I'll do that. I'm just going to clean up this little egg blower so I can use it at the end here. Are there any questions so far? I imagine most of you are probably at this stage working on your designs. If any of you have chosen to go right in with wax, you might be at a stage of thinking about using the dyes. I'm going to fill up my kitsuka again. Choose a new egg. All right, I'm going to flip your angle so you won't see my face so much. You're going to see more of what I'm doing here, so you'll have a better view of the wax going onto the egg and sort of the precision and control I use there. So, all right, I think that's a pretty good angle to be able to see what I'm doing on the egg here. You'll have a little bit more detail as I go. I think what I might do is refer to maybe some of these sketches. Like I had drawn this out just as an idea for myself. So as I said, there's a lot of symbolism behind this practice of egg decorating. This is something that's actually passed down through Ukrainian women. These days, everybody does it, regardless of gender, but the tradition itself was a matriarchal tradition. So the women would actually do this at night because the tradition was kept secret. So every family would do it very, very individually. and they'd have their own secret recipes for the dyes, and they'd have their own practice in terms of how they went about using the wax and whatnot. So everybody has their own way of doing it, and no two eggs will end up being exactly alike. Obviously, the egg is used in springtime because it symbolizes birth, and that comes to, you know, animals, but also crops. So a lot of the symbolism is related to that, be it the eternity band, which is that wave pattern referring to water and growth, or those animals referring to fertility. Geometric patterns, which are often meant to refer to that idea of farming and crops. So this is a tradition that dates just way, way back. I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to do, and I do it in pencil because honestly, I'm pretty indecisive. I kind of need to give myself a little bit of an idea. You could always change what you're doing once you go on there with wax, right? You're not tied to what you're doing with the pencil. Give you a better view of what I'm doing here. And of course, despite this practice, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Despite this practice going, you know, dating back to pre-Christian era, there's not intact examples. That's for obvious reasons. It's made of egg, so eggshell, which is very hard to keep over time. But also, unfortunately, during the wars, a lot of the examples of those eggs were destroyed. So in the Ukraine, for example, there was one museum which had over 7,000 eggs. And in World War II, every single egg was destroyed. So there's been a lot of loss over the years of this tradition. So I'm going to do a little eternity band, which again is just this wave pattern, which is one of the more popular symbols. I'd say geometric symbols are probably the most popular for anyone who's kind of struggling with what to design. I always say go in with the geometric patterns, you know, creating a more abstract pattern or just dots, triangles, diamonds will always end up looking pretty spectacular when it comes to putting color on there. So you can kind of see I've got my eternity band on there. I'm going to do kind of the same on the bottom. Now, I don't tend to do anything really on the tip top of the bottom simply because that's where I'm going to put a hole. So I don't fuss too much there, but we'll do something interesting at the bottom here too. And I imagine most of you will spend probably a couple hours working on this on your own, not necessarily with me here, but you can spend just hours and hours doing this. But amazingly enough, there's actually a woman in the Ukraine who does 36 in one day. I think that was her average. So yeah, there's some artists that, and when I say she's doing 36, I'm talking about true artistic patterns too. You know, nothing I could accomplish on my best day. These are people that have been doing it their entire lives. But I quite like this, this particular craft because it really just turns out so interesting. I've had very, very young kids do it too and focus on just doing, you know, drips of different color, and it always ends up quite spectacular. Okay, so got that. I think I'll put a little bird here in the middle. I don't know that I'm going to do all the details in pencil, really just trying to give myself something to follow, because the second you go in with wax, it is a little bit more intimidating, or it can be certainly. You can see sort of the bird. And of course, I'm always remembering I have two sides to work on here. So I'm duplicating the pattern. You could do a totally different pattern on one side. I'm just duplicating here.
One thing I should probably also mention too, especially if there's anyone with kids doing this, is that the wax, of course, does get very hot. It does occasionally drip on hands, and yes, that does hurt, but this is not, it is a beeswax, so it's not the sort of wax that will cause serious burns. But one of the things that people tend to do, especially when they're holding kitsukas, is they'll want their fingers up as high as possible for control. But you do kind of want to keep your fingers a little lower on the kitsuka, simply because what actually could hurt more is touching the metal of the kitsuka. So that's something just to sort of keep in mind, not just for kids at home, anyone at home really. Go. So I'm just kind of adding in some diamonds, some geometric shapes here. I think I'll go in with some dots around here too, just to make it a little bit interesting, but I've done a very traditional kind of design there. And I think I'm going to maybe do some of these basic circular lines with wax initially. Yeah, and then I'm going to do kind of, I don't want so much white in this area, so I don't think I'm going to put my first lines, because keeping in mind whatever I go in with right now will keep it white. So these first lines that I'm going to do now are going to be my white lines. So let me see, can I pull this within the camera frame? Let me see if I can slightly change my angle of camera so you can see a little better. That's a little better, just so that you can see how I go in and out of the flame, because I don't think I even really touched on that when I was doing the quick version. But something you'll notice when I am doing this is that not only am I coming from the side of the flame, but I'm constantly, quickly, I'll go in with the tip of the kitsuka back and forth, just so it keeps it at a warm temperature, but doesn't get super, super hot. So as I say, I'm going to do some of these lines here. Get my kitsuka warmed up again. Shouldn't actually take too much because it was a pretty new kitsuka, so it wasn't super gunky. Let's see. Take it a second to get this one started, actually. There we go. So like I say, I'm just testing it on the aluminum foil because I don't want to surprise once it comes to putting it on the egg. So I kind of hold this kitsuka a little like you would a pencil. Actually, is that like a pencil? Yeah, I suppose, sort of. Really, it's up to you. The further your hand is back on the kitsuka, the less you might feel like you have control. I don't have a huge problem with doing sort of a steady line, but I know a lot of people find that quite challenging. So circles and stuff might take you a little bit more time. Just be patient. This wax, as I said, shows up as quite a deep black. So you can have a very thin line. You don't have to go over that again unless you want that to be a thicker line. Even that very thin line, it's covered in wax. Like that's going to stay white. And it's quite amazing. I've seen some modern Pysanka done by artists, contemporary artists that are, you know, cartoon characters, and it's spectacular. One thing I'll do with this egg as well is that I will do a double dip. So what I mean by that is I'll dip maybe half the egg in one color, half the egg in another color, just to show you how you can do that. I know a lot of people find that to be quite funky. Putting in some more wax. So don't be afraid to experiment that way. It's a little harder to do. My hands, you will see, are covered in Pysanka dye. If you're wearing gloves, that obviously won't happen to you. The Pysanka dye will come out. I don't mind that it goes on my hands. It's just a little stronger than food dye, so it'll take a little scrubbing with some soap to get it on my hands for sure. And I can see my kitsuka is getting a little hot because I can see kind of globs forming at the end. So you can see again how quick I'm going back and forth to my flame. I don't even really think about it. You kind of get used to doing that. But I do a nice line back, nice line, back to my flame, and just back and forth. And here's my eternity band, this wave pattern. As I said, eternity bands are one of the more popular symbols to show up on these eggs. For obvious reasons, you know, it looks like waves. So people automatically associate that with water. And water is essential to all life on the planet, and certainly essential in the spring when it comes to growth. Now, if you're finding at any point, if anyone has a kitsuka from me, this probably won't happen. Sometimes it does. But if you're finding at any point that the kitsuka is not really coming out, or it's just, you know, it's being a little finicky, you can give a little tap on the aluminum foil. Sometimes it does gunk up a little bit inside. That does happen. And there are tools to, essentially they're needles, to go into the hole to sort of get out the gunk. But these wooden kitsukas, I find, don't tend to do that as much as the metal ones. But I mean, if they're used over and over and over again, and I've given you guys quite a bit of wax in your kits for the purpose of you being able to do more than one egg. So you have the option of doing a few eggs at home. Your dyes will also last for a really long time. You just need to, of course, be cautious about, well, most of you probably aren't going to have this issue, but what happens in some of my classes is a kid will go into a dark dye and then put it into yellow. And that will, of course, contaminate the yellow. So any cross mixing like that you don't want to do, but otherwise your dyes will last quite a long time. I'm going to put this into my yellow. So again, rest it on the spoon, gently put it down. And I'm just moving it so it touches all surfaces. The longer I leave it in here, the more it'll take on that yellow, but only to a certain point. Really, the Pysanka dyes, they go the color they're supposed to go, and that is what they will be. It doesn't take a long time for that to happen, because this is such a, it is a pigment that I gave you, so a true dye. So again, I lift it. You can see how I'm using the spoon just to make sure that the dye stays in the container, and straight onto my paper towel. Put this back, and I'm just going to wipe that down. So yeah, it's a pretty good yellow color there. You can see it's a nice yellow color. And you can see as well, well, you can sort of see those striations on the egg. I don't know if you can see that in the pattern. That's just the nature of the egg I'm using. So now I'm going to cover up, I think this bird, I'd like this bird to be, actually, why don't I fill it in? I'd like this bird to be yellow. So I'm gonna do the outline first, and then I'll probably get my kitsuka a little bit warmer, and I'll try and get a glob on there to sort of show you guys how you might be able to do that. Though I find most people, if you're doing that, it's unintentional. So, all right, so let's just get a line there. There's different weights of kitsuka. I've given you all who had the kits medium fine. So that essentially refers to the hole that the wax is coming out of. There's some you can purchase that are very fine, which of course is a much smaller hole, and that allows for very intricate detail. And then there are some that are wider, which are easier if you're coloring in large spaces. So I've just got my little outline of the bird. I'm going to get, you go through this wax quickly, you know, once that kitsuka gets hot. A little bit more wax, which is why I gave you guys quite a bit. I'm going to try to get this a little hot and use some of these globs. When I've put in new wax, that's when I tend to flip this back and forth and get the back of the kitsuka. So you can see it's come out in a bigger glob there. So I just kind of move it as I go, get it hot again. You can see that was a drip. I did that intentionally, but that is what happens unintentionally to a lot of people's eggs. It's just easier to color in then, because otherwise you're going to be sitting there sort of scribbling as you try and color in, and that's quite challenging. So the hotter the kitsuka is, the easier it will be to color in. You just have to be cautious about where it's dripping. And I've pretty much gone through the wax that I just put in there. And I have to say, I'm very used to doing this. So I have been told I do it quite quickly. Keep in mind, that's why I showed you all those steps, so that you do not have to be going at the same pace I am going. Because I'm not going to keep you here for 3 hours. I'll keep you here probably a little over an hour, and you can continue doing this. You should have the process pretty down at that point. And it's really fascinating too, depending on where I've done some historical research into Pysanka. Depending on where you're talking in the Ukraine, there are places where different Pysanka are seen as talisman of different things, whether it be luck or fortune. A lot of the time, Pysanka are given as gifts. So it is actually a bit more rare to keep them for yourself. The thought is that you bring it as a gift around Easter time these days of well wishes to a fellow family. Now, of course, for us, we are not socializing so much these days due to the pandemic. So I think a lot of us will probably be keeping these in the home, but it's always a great gift around Easter time for, people even within your own family. It's such a unique practice, and certainly something you can get better and better at over the years. So I've just done my little swirls, my bird. Quickly colored this guy in as well, put a little bit more wax in here so I can do that. You can watch me do that coloring in technique again. I'm going to leave my other shapes for other colors. There we go. It's getting hot, so I have a glob there. And you can see how thick that is. That will be a little harder for me to take off once I go to using the candle at the end here to take it off. Not as big a deal if you're going to put this in the oven. And if the worst does happen, and at some point here, which has happened to me many times teaching this program to kids, and you drop an egg and it cracks a little bit. A couple things about that. One, if you drop it and it looks like there is no issue, keep in mind there is probably going to be a tiny fracture in the egg that you can't see. Now that only becomes important if you go to drain the egg, because if you try and crack a hole in the bottom, it might split where that crack that you can't see is. So if you do drop your egg by accident, it seems fine. Just be very, very cautious at that point. The temperature for the oven, the question there, no worries at all, is 35 to 40 degrees Celsius or 95 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So a really low temperature essentially, just to slowly get that wax to melt off. It kind of depends on the oven, because convection ovens will do it a lot faster, but it shouldn't take too long. If you preheat, the wax should come off pretty quickly, so you just want to keep an eye on it. All right, so I think I have about all I want to do in the yellow. I'm going to go into orange, why not? I didn't include orange in your kits because I think it's such a close color to the yellow. It doesn't create as dramatic an effect as some of the other colors I've given you, like the red. And so going from yellow to red. Oh, that's one thing I didn't mention, actually, your sort of sequence. Yellow obviously is your lightest, then comes orange. Now, red and blue are essentially the same level. So what that means is that you can go either or do both. Because if you go into red and then into blue, you're going to end up with purple. If you go from, actually, I can't totally remember. I believe if you go from blue to red, you're going to get fairly true colors between the two. So it is a bit of an experimentation. You can sort of see as you go. This has taken the orange pretty well. I don't think I'm going to do too much in orange. I'm just going to do maybe a couple shapes. All right. And when you go to stores, lots of places used to carry Pysanka supplies. Not so many do these days. In Calgary, if anyone's interested, Kensington Art Supply does. And I think they're one of the only places that does. And it is a little pricey. Pysanka supplies are pricey, but obviously they can last for multiple years. And what I was going to say is that there's little kits of dyes. So it'll be more specific. It'll be colors that go together, colors that won't clash. Often which is actually why I didn't include too many colors in your kits. If I include, 8 colors, then really you can do all of them, sure, but you're not going to end up with true colors. Because it just won't work that way. Okay, so I just got a bit of a glob, which I didn't mean to do because I got that hot, and that's my diamond. So what I might do is I'm just gonna make that a slightly larger diamond. So it was all intentional, right? Did that painter used to say, happy little accidents. All right, so do I have enough orange? I'm gonna maybe color in a couple of these. I really like the reds and blues. I think those end up looking, I think I gave you guys a better red than I have here, a really vibrant red. So it's really dramatic if you end with the black. Okay, so I think that's enough of my orange. I am going to go into my green. So this is the equivalent of you guys going into blue at this stage. Green and blue are again on the same level. That's why you don't have both. Get my paper towel ready. Now, because I've gone from orange to green, I'm not going to get a true green. I'm going to get more of a browny green. We'll see how it sort of takes the color here, but usually, yeah, it's a bit of a off green. Interesting color, but it's not a true green. And that's just how it goes when you mix the colors. I always refer to these sorts of colors as being a bit more of dragon egg type color. And sometimes you can end up with, especially with the blue and red you guys have, you can end up with more of a turquoise as well. So I'm going to cover up a little bit more, I'd say, with this green. How am I doing time-wise? Yeah, I'm coming up on an hour, and I won't keep you guys too beyond an hour. But I want to be around while you're working in case anyone does have questions or comments. Fill in some more of these shapes. I even had parents come one year, and I knew they were coming, and I'd sort of cautioned them because they had a 2-year-old, and certainly 2 is younger than I would normally ever do this program with. But they did fine because, they were the ones holding the supplies and sort of helping their child do it. And what they ended up doing was just squiggles all over the egg, just different little squiggles, because that's kind of what the child was able to do. And did that in different colors at each stage after dyeing. And actually that egg ended up looking amazing. So, it really is, there's my eternity band. It really is something where you have a lot of freedom in what you choose to create. I'm just going over my eternity band now. You can see kind of when I do this, I do have a fair bit of control. I don't tend to shake, which is why I've given myself the options of going for this smaller design. And to be honest, this is such a personal thing. You know, it's not that my hand doesn't ever shake. It's that I've done this for many years, and I could probably do it in my sleep at this point. So take your time. I'm going quite quickly, but the nice thing about everybody doing this virtually is you get to do it at your own pace. Go. Oh, a little bit of a glob on that one. That's all right. I might just do a few dots in here too, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Here we go. And I do have a fair bit of surface area. You know, I'll do some of this in other colors, but I'm going to add some more little dots following the shape of the bird. Slightly different sizes here. Because really the more of these tiny details you add, the more spectacular it will look in the end, for sure. Because you'll have so many of those layered colors popping through. And it is feeling like spring outside, which is very, very nice. I believe it is the first day of spring today, right? So how nice to be doing this on the first day of spring. It feels very symbolic and appropriate. Certainly these eggs are meant as a wish for a very productive spring of growth. So I have some dots around the birds. Obviously the wax is going to look a little messy. You can see areas where it's a bit thinner, a little thicker in other areas. I'm not concerned about that at all. That is totally inconsequential because the wax comes off in the end. I'm just doing a little heart because I had a nice little space here. So why not do a little heart? It's sad to think though, just thousands and thousands of Pysanka lost in war in the Ukraine, but you see evidence of this practice everywhere. There are buildings meant to look like Pysanky, and of course we have that. We have the largest, technically the largest Pysanka. It's obviously not made of egg in Alberta. It's that big sculpture. What is that? I can't think of the name of the town off the top of my head right now, but in just outside of Edmonton. There's a very cool Pysanka egg sculpture. Vegreville, that's the name of the town, Vegreville, Alberta. Okay. And in the Ukraine, they have a museum that looks like a Pysanka egg. Sculptures outside as well. I'm going to go into the yellow. We'll see what happened, or excuse me, the red. We'll see how it takes the red. Going from green to red is a little bit of a tricky one. As I say, the green and red are kind of on the same plane of color, not considered lighter or darker than one another in this practice. So I'm going to end up with red, but again, this is going to be what I call a dragon egg red, which is going to be very different from the red you saw in that first demo egg I did. So pull this out. It's quite beautiful. It ends up, you know, having these striations of the egg, and it's quite lovely. See? So yeah, you can kind of see there my dragon egg red, as I like to think of it. And quite a bit of this is being covered in this wax now. All right, go up some more. And let's think about what I want to have be some red. You know what I might do is, you know, I'm keeping this to such little designs. I might actually color in some background. Now there is, I usually tell kids, especially in classes, to avoid doing that. I don't worry about it as much with adults in my workshops. It's just that it takes quite a bit of time, and that it can be much more challenging taking off the wax. With that said, if you're using that oven method at home, that's something that should, you know, make that a lot easier for you. But coloring in large areas is something I would sort of caution against. You don't really want your entire background to be red, for example, but whatever your final color is that you use, that will be your background color. So if black is your final color, then that's your background color. If you stop at red or blue, that's your background color. So I sort of say that that's a better way of doing it, instead of trying to color in a color in any large sections, because it's just quite challenging to do. All right, so I've just done a little line of red there. Let's see what else I can do here. Now I'm not going to put a hole on the top of my egg because I'll be draining it from the bottom. So you can always do that at home too. Only put a hole in the bottom. The only way that won't work is if the hole is too small. If you only want one hole, you need to make sure it actually is large enough that it will drain. Otherwise, it essentially suctions itself inside the egg and it won't drain properly. So maybe I'll put a big hole here. Okay. Put another little heart on this side, nice little red heart. A little harder to see my wax as it's going down now because my color's gotten darker, and I'm putting a pretty fine line of wax. Get a little bit more in there. Something I didn't mention, but I'm sure you've figured out as you go, is that I'm always pointing my kitsuka down as I'm adding more wax, because I don't want that, you know, pushing out and dripping onto my hand. Go, nice glob that I can use to color that in. Perfect. Okay, nice little heart there. Maybe I'll do a few little dots around here. I'm really just filling in the space. I'm kind of randomly doing some things now that I hadn't outlined in pencil, just because I know it'll be more interesting when I go back in later and take off that wax. And I've had people do like a full peacock on their egg before, with each feather being, you know, different layers of color. So there's just such a variety of things you can do with Pysanka. All right. And finally, I think I will do some coloring in of this bottom area, because the only color I have left is black. So that's going to be my final color. So anything I really want to color in, I want to do at this stage. If at any point you sort of are accidentally scraping off some of the wax that's already on there, don't worry too much about that. Like I say, once the wax is on the egg, it's on the egg. So like I'm going around all these little dots. I'm not, you know, being that cautious that I'm not scraping into those dots. There's going to be a fine layer of wax already covering them, and it doesn't go anywhere. Good and bad of that. And one thing I'll mention as well is I will get this video up to YouTube. That'll probably go up next week. So that'll be on the Town of Okotoks YouTube channel. So if there's anything you wanted to review again, you can always go back and watch that, that video. All right, I think this is all I'm going to do in the red. I think I've done plenty. And I'm going to go into my final color, which is my black. Now, because I've gone from red to black, and I'm probably not going to let it sit here too long, my black's going to be a little purpley. So if you prefer that, what you do is sort of lift it and keep checking what the color is. The black really is one where it tends to have to sit for a little while longer to really take on a deeper black. And depending on the eggs, some eggs take to dye very easily. Some, it's a little bit more challenging. But if you wanted, you know, you went from red or you even the blue into the black, you can achieve a bit of a purpley finish if you don't leave it in the black too terribly long. So let me check. This is going to a pretty, you can see a little bit of the reddy. It's kind of a reddy purple at the moment. I kind of like the color, but I'm going to see if I can get a little bit deeper. And all I'm doing is I'm moving it in the dye, making sure each side is covered. Careful not to crack the egg as I'm doing that. Get my paper towel ready. I've waxed all of my hands, by the way. Will be messy by the end of this, but art's always fun when it's a little messy, I say. Okay. So I think this is good enough for me right now. I'm going to pull it out. Let it drain and drip a little bit there. You can really already see the color popping through. It does sort of look like, oh, the wax has come off, which is not the case at all. It just sort of really pops through. Now this actually took the black okay. It took the black pretty well. I'll show you here in a second. Just going to get it off as much as I can. You can see it's actually taken that black pretty well. So I'm just going to grab some more paper towel. Ooh. And I am going to do this the hard way, but the fun way, just so you guys get the reveal of my egg as well. And I'm going to take off this wax. So I'll show you the process again. Again, I tend to keep 2 fingers on the top and my thumb on the bottom. My paper towel in the other hand, obviously not moving it towards the flame. And yes, I have had people put it right into the flame in my workshops. And again, and this is actually why we have aluminum foil too, so you can quickly fold it and put out a fire. Again, coming from the side of the egg, and I am putting it, what's the best angle to show you? I am putting it right into the flame. Keeping it as low to the top of the candle as I can, because the higher I go, the more that flame is going to want to lick around the egg and scorch it. So you can see it's really drippy, drippy, drippy. Wipe and reveal. And this is going to be a bit of a process. I'm just going to go along here. Let's go. Reveal. It's kind of fun once you start revealing all those colors. It's fun to do this in front of classes of kids because I get the whole whoa as they see the reveal, which is always fun. But it should have a wow factor when you're doing this at home, even taking it out of the oven, of course. You'll have that reveal. And one thing I find people do when they're really challenged at doing this in the candle is they're just going too quick or they are wiping too slow. So really, if I have a thick glob, I am leaving it in this flame and letting that get really drippy and then wiping right away. So I'm not giving it time to dry. And because I'm doing it this way, I am going to kind of go over areas and really make sure any of that fine wax is gone. Because really your colors are going to pop. You shouldn't have kind of a, like this little heart. You can see it's like half revealed, and you really got to go back over those areas until you get all that wax off. And you should be able to feel it too, because it has a tacky feel. Whereas when you are doing this, or when it's completely revealed, it's actually very smooth. Okay. When I do the top and bottom, I am going to hold the egg slightly differently. Get this little bird's tail. There we go. Pretty good reveal happening. Not looking too bad at all. And really, I mean, though we've been here for over an hour, you know, I did that first egg and I did this one, and I've moved fairly quickly. You have a lot more time at home to spend on your design and really to perfect your lines and master what you're doing. Because this is pretty spectacular despite doing it so quickly. Like, that's the really neat thing about this craft and tradition. And there's a lot of storytelling that goes into Ukrainian Pysanki, a lot of family symbols and traditions. So it's something, if you choose to do it with anyone in your family, it's certainly something you can create your own symbols, your own traditions for as well. So I'm going to do the top. So obviously I'm changing how I'm holding this now. The longer your egg is in the flame, so if you have, you know, just a thick area and you're doing it this way, taking off your wax, you can actually cook the egg a little bit inside. It will not cook completely, but if I was doing this for a long time and the egg was getting quite hot, when I went to drain it, the egg would probably come out a little bit more as not broken, like you'd see the yolk as a circle. That happens a lot of the time when I'm helping kids with theirs. So pretty good reveal of the tip top there. And obviously in the oven, it'll cook the egg a little bit, which can affect draining, but just depends on if you're choosing to drain it or not. And I know it's not for everyone, so that's fine. Okay. I'm just about done this. So you can see it's actually pretty quick that I'm doing this with the candle. Obviously, I know what I'm doing. I've done this a lot of times, so I'm able to do it quite quickly. But when you have the hang of it, when you let it really get drippy, it does do the job very effectively. And you have that immediate payoff of getting to see your design. So this looks pretty done, but you can see it kind of looks dirty essentially along there. Like, it does not look like clean lines. So that's still wax. There's still wax up here. I can still work on this a little bit more. So I find sometimes people quit before all the wax is gone, not realizing that their color really can look a lot more potent than it does. So if you're doing this as your process, just take your time with it. Be patient and really check that all that wax is off. You can see the flame is kind of smoking a little. It really would like to scorch this egg. I am not letting it, but it would like to. All right. And one of the reasons I hold the egg sideways is because if you hold it tall, you're giving the flame more surface area to sort of climb and scorch. So it is a bit of a trick to hold it sideways. That's a bit of a hack, I'd say, in terms of not allowing that flame to scorch. All right, so I'd say that's good enough for me with my process here. It's looking pretty good. Colors are looking pretty good. Designs are looking pretty funky, I like. And so I'll do a final drain of this for you guys. Putting this candle to the side. Just use this as my container to drain it to. So again, you'll be able to see this a little closer. This would be the same process you do with a needle. Take this along the edge. I think actually, yeah. Take this along the, you see that? Yeah, the edge there. And I'm just sort of wiggling it back and forth until it pops in. Now I have just a very small hole. I'm probably going to crack that a little bit bigger just because, you know, it's me doing this as a demo. I want it to be easier. So I've cracked it a little bit bigger, flipped it, and I'm going to blow. See, this one's actually quite a bit more difficult to get out. There we go. Oh, so what's happened with mine is that my little tool is clogged. So I'm actually going to need to unclog that. Let's see if I can get it. All right, give me a moment. I'm going to run and try to unclog that and then drain it properly for you. All right, well, this is why needles at home are sometimes an easier option, because this is quite an expensive tool, but it's clogged. So I'll have to go in with a pin and unclog that later. So what I'll do instead is, what I would do is elevate this and allow it to drain. Now, if I put another hole at the top, that's just going to allow it to actually pull out of the bottom better. But even just because I did that as a bigger hole, even just elevating this and allowing it to drain, you can see that it is slowly going to drain. So that's what I would do. Here, let it focus. That's what I would allow to do it over time. So you can sort of see it there. We'll just let it rest right here. So that's about the process. I hope everything was clear to you. If you have any questions, just go ahead and throw them into the chat and I will have a look at that right now. Otherwise, I hope everybody has an absolutely fabulous Easter. I hope you really enjoy doing these Pysanka at home. And don't be afraid to shoot me an email at culture@okotoks.ca if you have any follow-up questions at all. This video will be up on the Town of Okotoks YouTube channel as well, so that'll be there for reference. So thank you all so much for joining me today. And as I say, enjoy this spring weather and have an absolutely lovely Easter.